Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Origins. Today, we have Connor from Abominable Toys. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm Connor. I am the owner of Abominable Toys and the co-creator of Chomp. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. We are excited to have you here as well. And so we'll start the show the same way we start every show, which is asking you, could you tell us a little bit about your creative journey, if you could share your origin story?
Yeah, I actually had kind of an interesting introduction to designer toys because whenever I started with making Chomp, I had no intention of doing anything with him, designer toys at all. And I didn't know a lot about designer toys whenever I started, but I kind of started collecting a bunch of different things in high school. And I had this thing with my dad where we sold comic books, and I just drew this little guy. I drew a little character, and it was a real simple, smooth version of Chomp. He didn't have a mouth, he didn't have swirls, he didn't have anything that like his defining features. So I did that. I didn't really think much of it. I was gonna make it like almost like a logo for my dad and I's comic book. So I was doing that, and then I ended up meeting Benjamin Sue, and he's the other co-creator of Chomp. He's a animator at Pixar, and I traded him a comic book, and he finished up Chomp and ended up making him into a much more finalized version. He added in the mouth, he added in the swirls, a lot of the defining and the color. Like, I mean, he is like standard Yeti colors, but that's not mine. Was just a black and white sketch on literally a piece of homework paper that I turned in and I don't have anymore. So I have a picture of it, and that's the only thing. But yeah, so he finished it up. We had a more refined version, and then I was collecting. I think I was collecting Tiny Ghost from Reese O'Brien. Then I've always collected stuff, so I was in a lot of Facebook groups and talking to people in there, and I just posted about it one time, and I was like, "Hey, I have this little character. What do you guys think of it?" And I just had people reach out to me, and they're like, "Hey, you should make that into a figure. You should make that into a pin. You know, all that sort of stuff." And I was like, "Well, I could maybe do something like that." So I didn't have like the name Abominable Toys or anything like that at that point, but I had all these people reach out to me, and I had someone say, "Hey, I know a sculptor. I can, if you want to get Chomp to be 3D, we can do a sculpt of it, and then you might be able to make it into a figure someday." So I started talking to him. We got a sculpt made, and I was printing them out in high school in my robotics class. So I'd print out the one version of the sculpt, and they're like, "Oh, we got to change the legs," and I print out like literally the next day. So I'd come back in the morning and I'd get the version of Chomp that I had, and I'd make the new version. And then I started posting about it, and I think we sold pins 2018. It's like the beginning of 2018, we sold the first pins, and they weren't doing crazy, but they were doing okay. So we did like a few different limited edition ones, like 25 pieces, like 50 pieces, stuff like that. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do figures. So I got the once we had the sculpt done and we had that, I started trying to figure out how I was going to do anything because I was in high school at the time. This was my senior year of high school. So I didn't know anything about production. I didn't know anything about any of that sort of stuff, business wise or anything. So I started reading articles about like, hey, here's how you make these different things. And I eventually found like after searching forever, like, I feel like it would be a much easier process because I was like, I figure a lot of people do this. But I ended up finding an article that was talking about polystone statues and that you could go on like Alibaba and you could find a factory through there and they like advertised there. And I was like, okay. And it was like the scariest thing ever for me because I sent a payment through it and it was a lot of money to like make the original sculpt and stuff. And it's people that I've never worked with before. And I didn't know how the process was going to go. I didn't know the shipping was going to go. So we made like it was like 100 of each figure. We did 6 variants, 100 of each figure. I produced them, they shipped them to us, and then we released the first figure in December, I think, of 2018. And it was the original Chomp and a gold Chomp. And those ones we sold out of the two in like 4 minutes. And I had like 100 and like 50, 140 total, like between the two variants. And that was like really crazy for me. I was like, wow, this is like I didn't expect anything like that. So then I was like, okay, this is really cool. I'm really glad that I got to do this. And then like a month went by and I was like, okay, I'm gonna release the next one. I did a founders one, which is and like it was like an orange colored chomp. And we released that one and it was 125 pieces and we sold out in 30 seconds. And I was like, okay, this seems like a legitimate thing, like something that I if I like actually try and keep doing it, I might be able to do this consistently. So we started going through like the rest of the variants of the first series, and I once we released Founders, I went and I edited run sizes and I ordered more of the other ones before I released them because they were all just going to be 100 pieces if not. So we did like a charity release for the Bigfoot and Glow Chomp. That went really well. We sold like 600 or 700 of each figure. And then we did the cotton candy one. And I think that was our first figure that we broke 1,000 pieces on. It was like 900 or 1,000. So we did that. And there was also a charity release. I did those ones like pre-order. So we would know like, okay, here's how much we should make. And then I had a charity aspect where on the Bigfoot and Glow, we had like a donation that went to the World Wildlife Fund. And then we had on the cotton candy one, we did the Autism Society of America and the Breast Cancer Coalition Fund. And we just had to like split evenly between the two. So yeah, those went really well. That was kind of like our main first ones. And then we did our first convention, New York Comic Con that year. And that was like when that was the first time we actually had something there. And I did it with a company called Plastic Empire because I ended up taking over my warehousing and distribution because I couldn't package all the stuff up in my house anymore. Because even when I did like the first like Founders one, it was 125 pieces, and I sat there in my house and I was printing labels and packing boxes for like 12 hours, and I was like, I can't do this all the time anymore. So it was very quickly when I got sick of that. I mean, literally the second figure, I was like, that's too much for me. So yeah, he reached out to me. We started doing distribution through him, and then we were able to do the first convention was New York Comic Con with Chomp, and we debuted a Statue of Liberty and a Haunted Skeleton one there.
Okay, Connor, you got to rewind in my brain. How you said you were in high school when this started?
Yes.
Like when you did the first release, you're still in high school?
Yeah, it was December of 2018. So yeah, I was almost done with my senior year of high school.
When I was in high school, I wasn't even doing anything close to this, and somehow you're making toys.
I had no intention of it. It was just a very lucky situation, and I met very great people, and I was very happy that I was able to do it that early.
I have this philosophy in life that life is just an accident and you go with it. And that's why I love your story, right? It's just an accident. Okay, so this is fascinating to me. So you're in high school, you design Chomp, you run in this cat at Pixar.
Mhm.
Are you in Southern California?
No, I'm actually in Pennsylvania.
Okay, so how do you find the Pixar guy?
So I actually post like I sold comic books like with my dad, and I had like the first appearance of Black Panther. So I just posted about it like normal, and he reached out to me on Instagram and was like, "Hey, I work at Pixar. Do you want to trade something for this?" Like, and I was like, "Yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to do something." And then I had the idea because I had the little character that I was doing. So we kind of linked up there, and we ended up doing it just on a trade randomly because he reached out to me.
I got so many questions, right? All right. So when you sell comic books, you don't mean like you're making your own comic books. You're selling like Marvel comic books, like
Yeah,
that kind of trade.
I didn't make my own comic books. My dad was always into Marvel and stuff, so we kind of bonded over those sort of things, and we collect comic books, sold comic books. It's just kind of like a thing that I was doing while I was in high school with him.
We'll nerd out later in this conversation about comic book because without going into it, massive comic nerd. Okay. All right. Then you make this trade for Black Panther, first appearance of Black Panther, right? Which I think is in Fantastic Four
52, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's after Galactus. Okay. So of course, he's an anime, hence, how Chomp looks like Chomp because kind of very Pixar-ish, right? Very cartoonish. So now you have this toy drawing animation thing, and you were saying you started reaching out to people on social media saying, I got this stuff, and the community's pushing you. I'm very interested how you go from, okay, I made a drawing from the Pixar guy, we got Chomp, to people going, here, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this.
Yeah, I was in like a lot of Facebook collecting groups because this is when I was like first introduced into designer toys because I didn't have a background in designer toys before then. I knew of them, like I knew Luke Chu, I knew Jason Farini. I've seen them in the past, but I never collected them. I didn't have a bunch of stuff. So in 2018, like the first designer toys I ever got into were like the Tiny Ghost figures that Reese O'Brien did. He was the artist with Funko, but yeah, he made Tiny Ghosts, and I was a big fan of all that stuff. I had all the different Tiny Ghosts, and I interacted with the people in there a lot. And Chomp just kind of randomly came to be in that time frame. So I was just talking to people, like just generic talking. And from that, like without me like publicly like going like, oh, I have this thing, I want to like do this stuff. I just had people like, hey, this is a really cool looking character. I think you should do something with it. And that like got me thinking. I was like, okay, well, I could make pins. I figured that part out on my own. But the everything else, like I like make t-shirts and stuff too, and stickers, like everything that was easy. I just did that right in the beginning. And then once I started doing it, I was releasing those different things. I had people that reached out to me like, hey, you should make this into a vinyl figure. I mean, that's the collecting community I was into. And I was like, well, I have no idea how I would do anything like that. But then Eric Johns is the guy who reached out to me mainly about the figure. And he owns a company where he makes like board games and stuff. And he had a sculptor that he works with all the time. And he's like, hey, I have a sculptor. You know, you could make this into a figure. And because I got that contact and I initially had the sculpt made from there, then it was just a matter of like, okay, how do I make this from this 3D sculpt into an actual production figure? And that's what took like, I just was just reading all sorts of articles trying to find out whatever I was going to do because I had no idea.
I love this story because this is the kind of stuff I don't think enough people hear and think of. Like, I love this because you're just self-made and you're teaching yourself and people are helping you, which is so positive in the world needs.
Yeah.
And by the way, if I got to mention it, I'm blown away that you tell this story of starting in high school and you got the best branding and your toys got such a good look. Like, I would think, you worked in the toy industry for 10 years and you did this. I have to give you your props. The branding and the toys and everything else is just fascinating. And then to hear that you started it this way is just makes my life, it makes me so happy. You start building this stuff. I love that you were saying like, okay, here's a person and was it Alibaba? What
Yeah.
that you gave him money?
Yeah, I used the Alibaba to find the first factory. I just found out that like people, you can produce like they advertise like all the factories like here we make pins, we make stickers, we make all this sort of random stuff. And that's how I found out about the custom vinyl figures because I read an article about I don't even remember where I read the article from, but I was like going through all these different ones trying to figure out where do I even start because I don't know how do I even find a factory in general. But yeah, it said in there like, hey, there's these different marketplaces, and Alibaba is just the one that I used, but where these factories advertise what they produce. I mean, it's kind of a lot more common now. A lot of people will know about Alibaba and all the different ones. Like even like some of those random like marketplace websites like Temu and stuff like that. They sell like random stuff, but they utilize the factories. But Alibaba is like an actual marketplace for producing stuff as well. So I found out about that and I was like going through and trying to find ones with good ratings and stuff like that. And that would actually make the low run sizes that I could do because I couldn't afford to make anything substantial. Obviously, nothing like big mass production. So it was a matter of like I went through like probably 6 or 7 different factories before I found one that I could like actually produce something with or would do what I was trying to do. So it was a matter of like going back and forth and just continually asking kind of the same questions until one of them worked.
So it's a lot of like trial and error with research and asking them stuff. And
Yeah.
okay, now I gotta ask you, I don't know the right way to ask you this question. You kind of even hinted at it. Okay, so you click go, like it's got to be terrifying to hit go on this idea.
Yeah.
How did you like, most people sit there and go, oh, I should go. You'll get the concept. I should go to the bar. I don't want to go to the bar. But if I don't go to the bar, I won't meet people. I need the people. Like you have this internal like fight of, yeah, I should do this toy. But they're going to take my money. Like, what was the final push yourself over the cliff to just, okay, screw it, do it? Was there anything?
It was kind of an interesting scenario because I didn't like like I said before, I didn't have any intentions of actually doing anything with Abominable toys at all. So it was an interesting thing where I had all these people that were like, hey, you should do this. And then I started selling pins and I was gradually selling out of them. They weren't doing like crazy good. I wasn't like making a ton of money, like doing pins and shirts and stickers and all sorts of stuff. But I was like, it would be really cool if no matter what happens with the rest of this, if I can say, hey, I made a vinyl figure, regardless of what happened with it. So I was just like, that would be a really cool thing to be like, hey, look at that thing on my shelf that I have, no matter what people thought of it or if it turned into anything. But it was just a matter of like, hey, I like this sort of stuff. I collect vinyl figures. I'm into this community of people. Regardless of what happens next with it, I am going to be very proud of the fact that I was able to produce anything at all. So that was kind of like my step into like this is something that I'm going to do, and no matter what happens with it, I'm going to be happy with the result. So that's kind of how I got into it.
I love that. I think a lot of people worry about the outcome of like, oh, if I'm going to publish this book, what if no one buys it? Or like, if I, make a vinyl figure, what if no one buys it? And
Yeah.
I love that you were coming from this perspective of people might not. I mean, I think you had enough support that you're like, some people are going to buy it. Is this going to be a scalable business? Could this be something I do full time? Right. I
Mhm.
love that none of that seems to be in your head, and you were literally just, I'm doing this because I want to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It was just something that like I've collected stuff my whole life. I collect Lego sets. I collect, action figures. I even collect like Funko stuff and things like that, comic books. So it was something that I cared about. It was something that I was passionate about enough that it's in communities of doing this sort of stuff. So to be a part of it in a more like legitimate sense, regardless of what happened with it, it was just something that I thought would be a really cool, fun thing to do. And the business came afterwards. It kind of like gradually grew after that point.
Oh, this is so cool. I love your story, Connor.
So cool.
So going back though to as someone who's also used Alibaba to find factories mainly for enamel pins and stuff like that, when I was first kind of getting into the pin world, like you mentioned you went through like 6 vendors. Could you maybe share a little bit more about what kind of questions were you asking them? Was there a lot of back and forth? I think for a lot of people who want to make something, but then they get to Alibaba.com and then they're like, what am I doing here? Like there's a million people that make can like there's like 30 factories. How do I choose one? Was your process just, oh, they can do what I want? Or is it more of like, oh, well, there's these 4 factories and then I want to go with this one?
Yeah, so the way the article that I initially read that was talking about the polystone factory, they said to look for ones that had high ratings because I mean anyone can advertise on there. So that was I was looking for ones that were in business for a long time that had high ratings, and the most important thing for me was that would actually produce the amount of figures that I needed to do because of how Alibaba is structured, most of them are like you have to make a minimum order of 3,000 figures, 10,000 figures, whatever it is, or whatever product you're actually trying to make. So I went on there and I searched custom vinyl figure manufacturer or something like that. And then there I just went through and I was trying to find they like advertise what kind of figures they make and you can see all the different examples. So I was looking at ones that like were kind of similar to what I was going to be looking for. And then those are the people that I ended up messaging. They had to advertise that they could do the order quantity that I was going to be able to produce, and they had to have produced stuff that was similar to what I wanted to do, and they had to have decent reviews. So those are the people that I messaged. I wrote up like this long thing, just kind of like, hey, I have this character, I have a sculpt for it, I'm looking to do this many variants, this run size on each of them. And like I said, at the time, it was only like 100 figures of each or something like that. So like it was a total like 600 figures. So 6 variants, 600 figures. I didn't even think about like packaging or anything like that at that time. But I went through and I just had this like write up of just a generic thing, and I sent it to like a bunch of different ones that fell into those categories of like I thought they could do it. And then from then it was just kind of like a back and forth of like, hey, we can do something like this, it'll cost this much, or it, and they'd quote me different things and I just kind of compare and like see what would work the best for me, like timeline and all that sort of stuff. So it was definitely a back and forth thing, but once I like determined what I was kind of looking for and I had like a group of factories, is just who could do it for a good price and I thought would be the most reliable. It's at the end of the day, it's a guessing game with it too. You can prepare as much as you want and ask all the questions, but you're gonna get whatever quality you end up getting from them. So ask as many questions as you can to make sure that you're getting exactly what you want to get out of this interaction with the factory.
I got it. As the guy who is the painter and the what's Alibaba? Maybe there's some listeners I'm thinking who does or like me who have no idea when you guys say Alibaba what that is,
Yeah.
what even entails.
It's like a marketplace. They sell like all sorts of stuff, like from like paper cups to boxes. Like it's like anything that like factories produce in general. So these different factories advertise on. You can search like it's just ALABABBY or BBA, I think, or BA, and you go on there and then it's like this orange branded website. You can search whatever you want. Like you can just buy stuff straight up from the factories. Like you can buy, like if I want 10,000 paper cups, I can buy it from whatever factory and they can put my logo on it. or you can just buy them like straight up, and they're like really cheap. So it's used for like a bunch of different people just buying large quantities. I know like a lot of baseball teams, especially like local ones, buy a lot of the merchandise that they give away at the stadiums on Alibaba. So they'll go there and be like, hey, we want to make, 1,000 bobbleheads of one of our players, and they'll do it with all the different ones, and they produce them and give them away at the games. But in general, it's like a large marketplace where factories advertise what they can produce and what they sell.
Thanks for breaking it down for
Yeah.
Chris and all of the people who don't know the factory manufacturing side of things. And so, Connor, like that got you through your first 6 drops. And I know you were like going back to changing quantities and ordering more. Is that the same factory you still work with? Or take us along that journey of like going from, all right, I'm just doing this because I love it. Oh, this is doing really well. Maybe I can make a larger business out of it, and then going into kind of like where you are now, like with packaging and all of that.
It's not the factory that I still work with. We switched over factories one time. We had a situation where we were producing like a lot more figures. So we started doing like large quantities of figures, and we were ordering all of our variants at the same time. And usually in a situation like this, when you work with a factory for a long enough period of time, you expect to get better prices or the same prices for the duration that you're working with them, especially the longer you do it. But we kept getting prices increased on a bunch of different ones. Like, we've done like some very complicated figures, but the quantities that we were ordering, we should have been getting pretty consistent pricing. So we ended up switching over to a new factory, and the way that I found it was basically the same way that I found the other one. So it wasn't like a crazy new process for me at that point. But yeah, we ended up switching over. That was relatively recently, though. That was like, I think within the last like year and a half, 2 years, something like that. So, and we just started making like a bunch of different figures with them. But we ordered all those first figures, we did it, and we were producing with that first factory for a number of years, like probably 3, 4 years, something like that. It was going good. We were getting all these different figures made, and the packaging was kind of an interesting scenario for me. Like, I didn't know how I was going to package Chomp, but I had like this rough idea of like what I've seen other like designer toy boxes and stuff like that. So I like just sketched out, like I wanted to be like a slide box. I didn't want it to have seals because I didn't want people to be like, oh, I got to keep it in the box. I wanted it so they could take it out and then put it back in without them feeling like, oh, I'm gonna lose value from this thing. So I made it a slide box, so it just slid open and it didn't have any seals on it, but it had enough tension so that it like held well. I didn't know like what kind of slide box it was gonna be, so I started drawing it out, and I was like, I want the face to be on the front, text on the top, and I just kind of like generically. I do have that sketch. I didn't turn that one into my teacher. I have that of the actual box design. But it was just, I came up with roughly what I wanted, and then I contacted them and said, hey, I want to do a box like this that slides, doesn't have seals on it. And they sent me a bunch of different ones. And they actually, the factory that I worked with showed me an Alex Pardee box of a figure that they made like a while back, I guess. And it was basically what I wanted. And I thickened up the sides and made it like a real heavy duty like box. So like it felt pretty substantial, and it has like the custom like die cut foam insert and stuff. It doesn't have like a plastic insert or anything like that. So we did it that way, but it wasn't like I was like, I know 100% sure this is how I'm going to package it. It was like, I want something that I know people will be able to open and display. And I had a general idea for the box, and then the factory just kind of showed me what they had, and I made a decision from there. So that's kind of how the packaging part ended up fitting in. And now with Chomper, like Chomper's a like baby version of Chomp that we released a little while ago. He's a smaller form factor. He's a smaller figure. So we were able to take what we learned from Chomp, and we adjusted the sizing of the box and the packaging and stuff to make sense in like, okay, we can fit this many more in a case, and all sorts of stuff that had no idea or even thought about whenever I was doing the first ones. So once we did our next version of our next character, there's a lot of things that I learned from that first order of Chomp, and just all the Chomp orders we've done from then forward, that we kind of applied to Chomper, and we kind of had like a head start of like, okay, here's all the stuff that works with him, and here's all the stuff that didn't work so well. So we had a better idea, and it wasn't just as much of a guessing game of like, here's what I have a general idea of what I'm gonna do, and then just kind of filling in the blanks as the factory sees fit. It fell into place. I had a general idea of what I was trying to do with the packaging and stuff, but it wasn't anything that was like completely solidified or that I knew exactly what I was going to do.
That's still super Awesome. I think the obvious question that I feel a lot of creatives might have, while I love your story, there's also a little bit of maybe jealousy of like, wow, like he just came out and like this thing blew up. And so it sounds like a very easy process, even though I know in reality there's probably lots of hardships and struggles. Would you be willing to share maybe what some of the biggest barriers along your way have been?
Oh, definitely. The one thing that I've had happen to me more than anything else is me messing up because I didn't know what I was doing. I've had so many scenarios, especially like so our first convention was New York Comic Con. I've been to conventions in the past, but I never had anything to sell there or do anything with. So we were gonna make a Statue of Liberty figure and a chomp in a t-shirt that said "I Chomp New York." That was our plan. Statue of Liberty one ended up working fine. We had produced that one and it was good, but the t-shirt one, we had an issue with the mold and me just not paying enough attention whenever I was like doing it. I approved it and we went into the molding and ended up coming out of molding and it just didn't look good. It was a bad looking figure because I just didn't look at it well enough. So like, okay, we can't do this figure. We have to cut it. So then we were gonna do a skeleton figure was the next figure in that series of chomps that I had. I had like a rough outline of the different ones I was gonna do. So it was gonna be like an X-ray kind of looking figure. My plan was gonna be white and I was gonna have like a blue outline around of it. So it kind of looked like an X-ray and it was gonna glow white. The factory made our first variant and it was like blue, like the whole thing was blue and it was glow in the dark blue and it had white eyes. And I was like, that is not at all what I like. I even had art and everything. It was completely different from what I wanted it to be. So I was like, okay, this isn't going to work. We're going to have to do something else. So I started getting them to make more samples and do a different skeleton figure. It started getting really close to the convention. And without me doing like any sort of like crazy shipping before, because everything I was doing before, I didn't have any sort of schedule. I didn't have like a date where this had to ship by. It was all like, okay, I ordered this, I'll release it whenever it comes in, and then I get pictures and I'm ready to go. But this, I had obviously had a hard date that I had to hit. So we started getting pretty close to the convention of like when we had to have stuff like produced and shipped. And we had the sea shipping deadline come and go. So we had to like, we made the decision like, okay, we're going to airship stuff in. But Dustin, the guy at Plastic Empire, was like, hey, I think that the blue one that you did looks good. I think you should release that alongside the Liberty one. And I was like, initially I was pretty against it because it was, to me, it was a mistake. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. But I ended up like liking the design quite a bit from a different standpoint where I called it Haunted Skeleton. And we airshipped them in to the convention. And that was 5-day shipping from China to the convention. It arrived at our booth the day before the convention. And it was like, I was so stressed out. I felt horrible. Like I felt sick because I was worried that it wasn't going to come in. The figures came in. We paid so much money in shipping. They came in and our factory decided to take one box and take it off of the pallet. So they shipped one full pallet and one singular box that had, it was like 3 or 4 Liberty figures in it. And the convention charged us $700 for that one box of figures. So we ended up having that convention happen and we sold out of all of our stuff. And the sale went great and everyone at the convention was great. But we made like maybe $50 on everything from the figures for selling all of them. Our margins were like razor thin. I mean, we honestly might have lost money at the end of it, but that was definitely a very big thing that I was worried about from then on out. But consistently, I'll have situations where I'll do something new at the factory, like I'll have a new variant or something like that, and we'll test it out and it won't go well for whatever reason. And I'll take that into the next thing. Consistently, all of my updates to the figure and everything that I've done that's new is from me messing up with a series of other things. So we started doing with Chomper, where doing our new molds for our wave of Chomper, and we're molding all of these like hat pieces like that fit into the top at the same time with the original mold. And before we did pay for molds for like, all these different variants at once. But so you'd pay for a mold and have the sculpt, and then you'd go back and be like, okay, I want to do a different one that has like a different hat or a different arm or whatever. Now I'm combining them into one big mold, and I'm molding 10 different hats with one body. And then I will periodically release the different figures from the one mold cost, because the mold cost is one of your biggest costs when you're producing a figure. So all that sort of stuff is just stuff that I learned from paying more money than I should have, or not timing stuff right, or not telling the factory what I should do. And that's kind of, for me, what I've taken the most from this experience is I came into this situation knowing nothing about designer toys or how to produce stuff or anything like that. And I gradually, all the updates and upgrades I've done with Chomp and Chomper have been because I learned about something, I messed it up, and then I adjusted for the next one. So it's a series of making mistakes and trying to fix them for the next one. That's how all of my production has been since I started. And now I have a bunch of systems in place where I make less mistakes than before. I still make them consistently all the time, but it is significantly less than when I started. So it's definitely been going better the more that I learned from messing up. But if I didn't mess up and I didn't do that stuff the way that I did, I would never think about it. And then it would come to a situation where I'd have the exact same thing happen to me later on. And it could have been a lot more catastrophic. But since I learned from it because I messed up in the past, it's just kind of, I'm able to build it up and do more with the business and with the brand and the characters and stuff like that than I would have been able to without me to making those mistakes that I did.
Connor, you remind me of old movies going through my head. Ed Wood by starring Johnny Depp, and he turns in a movie and it's shit, the shit movie. And the guy goes, "It's a shit movie," and he's like, "Well, the next one will be better." You sound like that kind of guy. Like all the problems that happen that nobody talks about, which, by the way, really appreciate you talking about it. These things happen. You meet so many people that go, "That's it, I quit. Like I'm not made for this." But you keep going. I mean, you made $50 at New York Comic Con. We'll get into the Comic Con in a sec. But like, I'd love to get in your brain. Like, how do you keep going?
I think what helps me the most is that I didn't know anything going into it. I didn't set out to make designer toys or anything like that. So I know that because I did it, that anyone else can do the exact same thing that I'm doing without any sort of like background like that. So it helps me a lot where I can like get into that mindset of like, everyone else is dealing with these same problems, regardless of them talking about it. And like you said, these are the issues that people face. And obviously, bigger companies that are producing things aren't going to worry about those issues much because they have all these systems in place so they won't happen. But for me, as an independent person doing it, I understand that I'm going to mess up a lot. And I find that I really enjoy what I'm doing. It's something that came into that I wasn't planning on doing. And I didn't have an intention of making toys, but I love it. It's something that I really enjoy. I'm able to do whatever I want. I can make whatever figures I want. I can do anything like that. And we had like so much fun, like especially at Designer Con, because we did Chomp Coffee one year where we just had like them come in, and I ended up teaming up with a team at Seven Seas, and we made literal like Chomp coffee that we roasted. We had bags there, and I just themed the whole booth around it. We had mugs, we had aprons, everyone was in like these uniforms and stuff, and we got a booth, and it was just really fun because I was able to do like something that I would like to do in general, but there's no limits to it. So I'm very inspired by the fact that I can just continue to do things that I like and respond to how people like it too. But like we did ice cream this past designer con. The first designer con we ever did, I bought an 8-foot tall gumball machine and we filled it with pins to have at the booth. And that was in 2019. But it's very fun to be able to consistently release things that I am happy with and proud of and are things that I like. A lot of the stuff that I do and a lot of the Chomp things that I do are reflections of me and things that I collect, things that I like, different things like that. So having a job that's all I deal with all the time is stuff that I like is kind of like the best scenario. I don't see me ever getting a job that I'm going to like more than this or being able to do anything more than this. I want it to be as good as it can be. I want it to be, that's a situation with Chomp is to an extent a reflection of myself. So thinking about it that way, I want Chomp to be exactly what I would want it to be. So anytime I make a mistake, something doesn't go exactly the way that I want, I'm like, okay, this sucks. And I'm like, I usually get like real devastated about it for a little bit. And I have that little breakdown. I'm like, okay, this sucks. We're going to make it work. We're going to do something else. And for the next one, it's not going to go that way. Like you said, it's a matter of just learning from those mistakes. It's a matter of taking those things in strides. No, whenever you mess up, and just not letting it be the end of the world, because as long as you continue to do it and you're passionate about what you're producing, other people will like it. And that's kind of what I found out with even the figures that I'm not the happiest with, ones that like I see this one thing that I know is messed up because I didn't see it. People still love those figures, and most of the time nobody notices any of that stuff that really really bothers me. So it comes down to a point where people are going to, if they like your stuff, they'll follow it and they'll continue to support it. If you are passionate about it, it is something that you truly love to do. I think that that's kind of one of the things that really keeps me going with it.
Connor, that is so beautifully said and so well said. And I completely believe that, right? If it's in your heart and you have a passion for it, even when you're talking about those little mistakes, like, and I'm very jealous of you, by the way, that you have a job that you love. Very jealous. I want to change a little because the other mind blowing thing when you're telling a story. So I used to work in comic books, and the first convention I got to go to as an employee was New York Comic Con at Jacob Javits Center. And I got to go backstage like I'm an employee, and my mind is just blown. It's like, holy cow, what have I gotten myself into? I would love to hear, because you saying you were a fan, you went to conventions, like you're at New York Comic Con, like you didn't start at Tom's Farmer Market down the street. You jumped like to the deep end of the pool with sharks, baby. Like, just walk me through that whole experience.
That's another instance of like I've made friends with somebody and I started working with somebody that had an in with a bunch of different conventions. So Dustin at Plastic Empire, he's the person who ended up doing my distribution. He reached out to me like whenever I released my first figure. And he said, "Hey, I really love this, what you're doing. I want to be involved somehow." He said, "I have a warehouse. I can, fulfill product if it gets to a point where you need to do it." And it wasn't pushing me to do it. He was like, "Hey, I have these things that I can do if you want to do it with me. I like the stuff that you're doing." And so initially, I didn't do anything with it. I kind of ignored it. I didn't do anything with him. And then, like I said, whenever I released the founder's figure and it was 120 of figures and it took me like 12 hours to ship, I was like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do both of them. I can't do school on top of it. It was just I couldn't balance all of it. So I made a decision like, okay, I'm gonna have him do fulfillment. We talked it out, we worked all that sort of things. And he goes to all these conventions anyways, because he has his own, he owns a company called Plastic Empire, and they sell like a bunch of different collectibles and like Funko Pops and like all sorts of different things like that. So he went to like 6 or 7 conventions a year, and one of them happened to be New York. So just with the timing and how it worked out, it was like, okay, that's the first big one that we'd be doing. So he was like, we started producing the next wave of figures, and we had the idea to do the Statue of Liberty one and all that sort of stuff. And we kind of themed it around New York. So we had that whole thing kind of fall into place. And then we shipped them into the convention. And that was just, I'd like to say that there's some like grand master plan to release it at New York Comic Con, but it was just like, hey, that's the first big convention that's coming up. And, we themed it around it, like after the fact that we decided to do it. But yeah, it's a matter of like random things falling into place again. It was very overwhelming for me because that was, I think, my first New York Comic Con ever. I went to conventions before that, like I said, but I didn't do anything that big. I went to San Diego one time in 2016 with my dad, and that was like the craziest experience ever for me. And then we went to my local convention. I had one in Monroeville, Pennsylvania called Steel City Comic Con. And that was the first one I ever went to. That was in 2013. And I'd go to it, periodically. But those are just like little ones. Like, okay, I'll drive there. And, it'll take like 40 minutes and we just go there. But New York, it was definitely like a very crazy experience to be able to actually have a product there. And when we did it, it was incredibly overwhelming because Ben and I did a signing there for that New York Comic Con. And we sat there and we signed for 2.5 hours straight. Like just people coming in and they'd buy the figure, they'd take to us, we'd sign the box and the figure, and I'd go. And we just literally for 2.5 hours every single day of New York Comic Con, we signed figures. It was wild. It was not something that I ever expected to do. I even had, whenever I walked into that convention, I was going to set up and I was bringing things in. Someone stopped and asked to take a picture with me. And I thought that was the most insane thing ever. So it was very overwhelming and very cool at the same time. It was cool to see how everything was just kind of going. It was not something that I ever expected to come out of it, but it was a very fun experience. And now I've done tons of cons since then with Chomp, but that was definitely a crazy way to start with it.
To put it lightly, a crazy way to start with it.
Yeah.
Connor, I can't help but think of how many times you've mentioned kind of the serendipitous meetings, right? Between, you meeting Ben initially and doing this trade that eventually started it, and then someone recommending you, like, hey, I know a guy that can sculpt, and then it goes into, oh, I have a warehouse. Like, if you want, we can partner up and stuff. And so you've mentioned how this has been sort of this very serendipitous journey for you, but I know that doesn't happen to everyone in the
Mhm.
way that I think a lot of people can feel like, oh, I don't like putting myself out there. I'm introverted. I don't like meeting people. But I would love to hear your take or maybe even advice on how could people think about making more of these serendipitous connections? Because I think it's easy to be like, well, Connor is lucky because he met all of these people and it all fell into place. But I
Mhm.
don't think that at all. And I think even just talking to you, I feel like I would want to be like, oh, can I help Connor out somehow? But I don't know if you've thought about that. But would you be able to maybe distill some of that kind of wisdom or like how you show up for communities and with other people that have sort of led to these serendipitous connections?
Yeah, it's an interesting because I'm a very introverted person in general. I didn't like I wasn't super outgoing. I wasn't talking to a bunch of people in school or anything. I was the quiet kid that wasn't doing a ton of stuff like that. So I definitely see that perspective of it. It's something that like I only do public speaking and things like that because of conventions and all that sort of stuff. But it's an interesting thing where I feel like the more you care about what you're doing. And if whatever you're producing, you're making art, whatever it is, if you're passionate about it, I think people really latch onto that. If it's something that you actually care about, it will be kind of ingrained in how you talk to people about it. You don't want to be like super pushy. You don't want to be like, hey, I'm doing all this sort of stuff. It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. But you do want to be like, this is something that I care about. Here's why I care about it. And people really latch onto that, I think. And I definitely have had a ton of very, very lucky scenarios. I've met very great, awesome people that got me to the point of where I am, but I do feel like, to an extent, those scenarios wouldn't have happened if I wasn't talking about my product, if I wasn't putting it out there to begin with. Even just having Chomp posted and bringing it up and having, seeing what people thought about it really like makes the process go a lot faster. Because if you don't put your thing out there, you're not talking about it, you're not showing it or anything, no one's going to see it. So if you're doing things that you can, and everything's within your power, you're not going to be able to go from doing nothing to doing crazy stuff all at once. It's not going to be like one fell swoop of growing and getting super successful and stuff, but within your power, do as much as you can to support what you're trying to produce, advertise what you're trying to produce. I think that people will latch onto that and they'll follow behind you. They'll like the stuff you're doing. I genuinely feel like, especially with designer toys, the community is fantastic. The people that are involved in it would like the other people in it to succeed. I don't see it as a like competitive business scape that like, in a lot of industries it's like that. But when it comes to art in general, I don't think you have competitors. I don't think you have these people that you have to like, oh, I'm going to sell to this person and you're not going to be able to sell to them because I already sold to them. It's more like people follow people because they like the people, they like the art and things like that. So you're not really competing against each other. You're just showing yourself and what you do to people and they'll follow for it. So to me, I think that the more you put yourself out there, the more you talk about the things that you're doing, that you want to produce, the better of a chance you have to meet people that are going to be able to take you to where you want to go. And it's a matter of like also being receptive to that. Like people are going to, if they offer something to you, you obviously don't want to just like be like, oh yeah, 100%, I want to do it. You have to make decisions based on like what's right for you, what's right for your brand, what's right for, all that sort of stuff. You have to keep that in mind, but you do want to be susceptible to people wanting to help you. You don't want to just turn people away for no reason, and you also want to be susceptible to people talking about your product, whether that's good or bad, whatever it is, whatever you're making, you know, take notes of what people say about it. Don't like let it hurt you at night, don't let it like eat you up. But it's something that you should keep in mind. Like I've had so many different situations where I have released different things and people didn't respond the way that I wanted them to. And I took it really personally. Like these people were attacking me, but they weren't. They're talking about stuff in an open situation, which is kind of the same way that you are going about sharing your art, your figure, whatever it is. And you have to be receptive to it. You don't have to change everything because of it, but you have to keep it in mind. If you want to appeal to a bunch of people or a specific group of people, you want to be true to what you like and what you want to do with it. But you also want to be receptive to like, hey, if I do it this way, more people are going to like it. As long as it's something that you still care about and you're still happy to put your name behind, I think you can be receptive to changing things up or doing things different ways or making different products if you think that it's going to be better for the brand and it's still something that you're proud of at the end of the day. So I think that networking with people and stuff like that is something that kind of comes naturally from talking about your stuff, putting it out there, and just kind of feeding reception, back and forth. So it's not guaranteed. You're not going to meet all the right people all the time. It's not going to always come. But if it happens, you just got to be receptive to it and you got to be able to go with it, like be able to work with these people. It's a tough situation because, it's not something that everyone's good at by any means. I mean, I was horrible at talking to people, like really bad. It's something that I never did. But the more I did it, the better I got at it. And the more people I talked to, the more people it seemed wanted to talk to me. So it's a gradual thing. Everything kind of goes in strides and you will gradually meet more people. And the more people that you leave a good impression on, they'll, tell their friends. It's a very much a gradual process from the beginning to the end, and you'll meet more and more people throughout.
That's so well said. And to give validity to what you're saying, I'm an introvert. And if you met anybody, they're like, you're not an introvert. And my wife will go, oh no, he is. You don't know the real deal. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, right. You learn how to do this. You learn to start putting yourself out. And I agreed with you. It's beautiful. You ever listen to Rick Rubin? You're very Rick Rubin-ish on what he says. Like he builds everything Rick Rubin does, he does for himself. He doesn't care if it sells a million gold records, which they do. And so what I'm getting at is through this conversation, your words have been extremely placed. And I don't think you even realize it. You keep saying we. It's been not a lot of me. So I'd love to hear who the we's in your life, Connor.
Yeah, I mean, there's literally so many people throughout. Benjamin Sue obviously was a big one. He helped create Chomp and Chomper, and he brought the personality to the character that I didn't initially have with it, and a little bit of the direction of where we ended up going. So he's still a big part. He doesn't own Abominable Toys or a part of it, but he is the co-creator of the characters with me. We involve him in a bunch of stuff. We do a bunch of artwork with them. So Ben's a big part of it. Dustin with Plastic Empire, he's a very big part. He does all of our fulfillment. He also helps with conventions and stuff like that. And then we also have Eric Johns, who I mentioned before. He brought me to my first sculptor. There's a guy named Elaine Viesca. He sculpted Chomp, and he does a lot of our sculpts even to this day. And there's a lot of like people involved with it. Technically, I own all of Abominable Toys, but all of the people that I work with are what makes Abominable Toys work. I have a general direction of like, hey, I want to do a figure that looks like this, and I have all these ideas that will go launch at this convention, it'll do all these different things. But then I like take that and I have to break it down and be like, okay, we have an artist named Sean, and he does a lot of our box designs and different things like that. And Ben, he works at Pixar still, so he can't do all of our art. So he takes over a lot of those things. He does our packaging, he does our new figures. And we work with him a lot on those different things. So it's just a lot of different people. I go and I'm like, okay, I have this idea. I think it should look like this. It should have these colors. It should, be like this. I want it to be for this. And then we gradually work it out. And like you said, when I say we, it's usually me and Sean, the artist, or me and the sculptor, or, me and the warehouse, whoever I'm talking with at the time. There's so many different people involved in making one figure actually, come from an idea to being released or being on your shelf. There's so much that goes into it. And even like, I mean, my family, my girlfriend, they help me a lot with ideas and stuff. I always am just like, I have a million ideas of things that I want to do, and a lot of them end up getting cut down over time from being like, okay, that's going to cost way too much money. That's impossible. You can't actually do that. Stuff like that. So I have a lot of people that I bounce ideas off of and that help throughout this process. And it cuts me down to my better ideas. So what you see that we actually release are the better versions of them, and there's a million more that are way worse. So there's a lot of people that take it to that point.
I love this idea of kind of you being more of the conductor, kind of with the overall vision, but then you really, you've been so generous in acknowledging kind of all of the help that you've had along the way. That said, Connor, where can people find more about you, more about Chomp, Abominable Toys? What are all of the places that people should go to look?
Right now, abominablettoys.com is our website. All of our social media is Abominable Toys. We also have, as of this year, we have figures that are in Hot Topic that we released through Hamebe Robots, and we have figures that are in FYE. So we're expanding a little bit more into retail in general. Hamebe Robots, we licensed Chomp to them, which is a very interesting thing for me because we did our first licensed figure where I licensed Bob Ross. That happened 2 years ago. And that was very big. I mean, it's crazy because I was like, that's not something I ever thought I'd be able to do. And that was another thing where I was like, I just started looking up, who owns the license to things that I liked. And I mean, I was a fan of The Joy of Painting. I watched it all the time. So that's something that I wanted to do. And I wanted to do it the right way with what I'm doing. There's a difference. Like if you are making like one-off art pieces and stuff like that, I think there's definitely a place for making unlicensed licensed things. But since I'm just producing stuff, like I like with a factory, full production runs of everything, all the stuff that I've been doing, I want to do it as right as possible. So to me, that's licensing the characters or the IP or whatever it is. And this year we're expanding into like some much bigger licenses. So that's going to be really fun to be able to do. But yeah, Abominable Toys is starting to get a lot more of a retail presence. We did Frozen Culture figures were our popsicle ones that we had this year at Designer Con. Those are another one that are going to hit retail stores probably in the next few months. So we're planning on having them in a variety of different ones. And then the rest of our stuff, like our main 5-inch figures and stuff like that, they're all sold through abominablettoys.com. And then we're at San Diego, we're at New York Comic Con. We'll have a figure at MegaCon February 1st. So a lot of conventions, and mainly all the channels through Abominable Toys is where you can find out about us.
And Instagram, because I follow you a lot on Instagram.
And Instagram, yep.
I need to have you back for season 2 because there's so much more I want to delve into, like who influences you and some comic book nerdy stuff. But how we end the show is we always give our guests the final word, and it's literally anything. The floor is yours.
That's a very open-ended thing. I guess my big thing is when it comes to creating stuff, I'm not an incredibly talented person when it comes to art. I don't make any of the finalized art that we make for Chomp. I have a creative sense where I can come up with ideas, I can think about stuff, and I can talk to people about it and illustrate it to people. But it is something that I found that I am able to work with these people to get things to the point of where I envision it. So I think there is a place in the art community for everybody, no matter what your skill level is, no matter what you're doing. And I came from a point, like I said, I was doing it in high school with no background. I didn't even graduate college. I dropped out of college to end up doing Abominable Toys full time. So this is what I do, like permanently now. So I would want people to know, especially from my perspective, I guess, that anyone can produce stuff like this. You can make your own figures, you can make your own brand, you can do all of that stuff without having to have an art degree or any sort of like significant background in production or anything like that. As long as you care about it enough, you can learn how to do whatever it is you're trying to do. So that's something that I feel like I would have wanted to hear whenever I was in high school and I was starting this out, like, hey, there's people that, that have never done anything with this that are able to do it, without having that sort of thing. So that's kind of what I would want people to know, and what I'd want to end it on, is that no matter where you are in production or in art or anything like that, you can definitely get to the point that you want to if you care about it enough and you try hard enough and you meet the right people. There's great people that will be able to bring you up to that point if you interact with them and you talk with them and you gradually grow what you're trying to do. And obviously there's amazing people that will support you and buy your products and do stuff like that with you doing it. And they're the people that really make it more possible than what I do. Something that I'm able to do full time because of the people that buy Chomp and support it regularly. So I just think that anyone, no matter what your background is, can definitely get into art to some extent. It's something that's for everybody with no barrier to entry.